Sweet. Thank you very much for being on the show, man. It is an absolute honor to have you here.
Oh, it's good. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You are undoubtedly an absolute legend in your field. And anytime I have an opportunity to talk to someone of your stature, I'm really, really stoked, because I know there's a hell of a lot of knowledge in there to be extrapolated and kind of given out. And I know that you've been doing that for many, many years now and built an incredibly successful coaching business off the back of it. But I want to take it back real quick to kind of back to the start, because I understand getting into strength sports, getting into competing, you hopped around a little bit in terms of, you start off in powerlifting, you left powerlifting to go to bodybuilding, which I feel like is a big flip on what a lot of people usually do. And then of course, eventually you realized that picking up heavy stuff was the way to go. So you went back to powerlifting. So I'm interested, what took you away from powerlifting to start off with and got you into bodybuilding? And what was the kind of ultimate thing to kind of get you out of bodybuilding and pull you back across into the powerlifting world?
So I'll contextualize that a little bit so it makes a little more sense for you. Keep in mind that when this was happening, so like I did my first meet in 1996, there was no raw division. So there was no raw powerlifting. It was basically like, so if I showed up and I benched 400 pounds, and somebody else showed up and benched 400 pounds in the 198 weight class, and they benched 401 and they were using gear, they were using a shirt, then they won. So, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like you got a little asterisk and they're like, you get special points for raw. There was no real raw division. So I really wasn't interested in the gear. And so the high school that I was at, which was like a correctional school where I started lifting, there was only there was a few shirts. So there were shirts that were for the kids to use, but the one was too big for me, one was too small for me to do anything. It was too small for me to get it on, and one was too big for me to it did nothing. I was in a situation where I could do more without the shirt, and I could do more without the gear too, because I just wasn't really willing to handle the squat suit stuff. This was a time when you had to actually pull everything on. Keep in mind, there weren't this was single ply, there was no Velcro straps. It was a real ordeal. And to get in and train like that, I was a 16 to 18-year-old kid at that time. I'm like, nah. For people that I understand, the ones that did it, it made sense for them and allowed them to sort of safely pursue competition in that sport. But for me, I was I had already been lifting I probably started lifting pretty consistently when I was about 12 years old. I got a weight set for Christmas that was one of those real corny 1-inch bars. I talk about this all the time. The little, the 1-inch, it was a Hulk Hogan weight set. Yeah. And it had the 1-inch, the 1-inch bar with a piece of red plastic that rotated around it on the bar itself. I guess was to protect your hands. I don't know. Eventually we broke that off, but it was the sand plates. If you've ever seen the plates that you would fill with sand.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be 10 pounds. So, I got up to where it's supposed to be 25 pounds. So I got up to where I was doing 100 pounds for 10 sets of 10 on bench press. I do it every day because I didn't know anything about training. I had a very rudimentary understanding of it, like most kids do. I thought, I would work out with all the other kids in my neighborhood. They would come to my basement. Well, it was maybe 2 other people that were rotating in and out. But then I can remember, I would say when they would miss, I'd be like, dude, you just wasted all that work you did for the last few weeks. I really thought that, you know what I mean? I was like, man, I'm never going to miss, because I thought if I missed a session, I would get weaker. I didn't really understand. I was a kid, talking 12, 13 years old, 14 years old. And I can remember being 14, and I got to the point where I was working up into the weights and doing more and more volume. And I said, at that point, I was probably doing 100 pounds for 10 sets of 10. And I was doing military press when you sit on the bench and press out of the bench. Yeah. Military press, I was doing that every day too, and barbell rows. I hadn't started doing squats yet, but I remember I knew I had to do the barbell rows because that was part of the thing on the box. It said that when you pressed, you had to also do some pulling stuff. Yeah. So this is we're talking this day one stuff.
I love that shit, man. I love that.
There was a kid that I worked out with, and his older brother. We used to call him Captain Caveman because he looked he had long hair, and he just was a big brolic looking, I don't know, he looked like some kind of mutant savage, So we thought he would be really strong, So we're like, oh cool, let's see what he can do. So we brought him in, and I remember he tried to do the weights I was doing, and he got pinned with it and couldn't do it the first time. We're like, for real? And that was the first time I realized. I was like, man, this is doing something. this actually really works, you know. I'm actually getting stronger. And I'm grateful that I got into it when I did like that early, but it was something that was always there, but it was never like the center, if that makes sense. Like it was just it was there. It was
It's
along
just in the
for the ride.
background, just kind of every now and again, just taking your thoughts on whatever, but like never to the level that it is now.
It was something I did. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it was something I did consistently. And when you're that young, like what do you do consistently?
It was like
You know, like
playing sports when you're young. Like you might train like maybe a
yeah.
couple times a week. Like some weeks you'd be like, oh, weather's bad outside. I'm I'm gonna skip it this week. Like I'm not gonna go to training. And then like
I was talking about this. I was talking about that the other day. Like when I started, that around that time, like the reason I started competing in sports at school, like I did wrestling, was because there was a girl who was a cheerleader, and she was like, "You should do wrestling." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna do wrestling. I was gonna do that anyway."
sure, yeah, I'll wrestle. I'll wrestle. I'll wrestle everyone.
I was in there like embarrassing people on the Nautilus machines, you know. But as a wrestler, technically, I sucked. Like I had no technique, but I would win because I was just really strong. I was so much stronger than the other kids, and because I've always had these big hands, so I could just grab a wrist and roll. You know what I mean? Like so, you know, like I didn't have any technique whatsoever. And there was only one time that I really lost because I was bigger too. So most kids that were my size were fat. You know, so we're in my weight class because over a certain division, when you're younger like that, it's unlimited weight. So I was just into the unlimited weight class, but I was in
And
great shape. Like I had
if you slip into that category, you know you're gonna have to fight. You're gonna have to fight. If you're just getting over that edge, you're like, okay,
yeah.
this is gonna be a roller
Well,
coaster.
yeah, I thought, but most of the guys that I would end up seeing were like had like boobs hanging out of their singlet, you know, because it's unlimited. So you know what I mean. So I was like pretty jacked for a kid that age. And so, yeah, they would sometimes I would lock up with people at meets and they would be like, just pin me. Where I'm like, why are you even doing this? Like, your parents making you do this or something? Like, why are you here? You know? Yeah,
You
yeah.
start taking like bribes. You're like, hey man, I'll pin you in this time. I'm gonna need to see some cash at the front end.
Yeah, we gotta actually try for a little bit. So there was one time I was just outmatched in terms of tech, and I could tell he was very fast and he was much better than me. But I had a good grip, so I gripped him up, and I like fought my way to my feet, picking him up, and everybody was going crazy, like in the whole gymnasium, you know, like parents and stuff, because I don't think I had been beaten to that point, and like I slammed him, and you're not allowed to slam him.
Oh.
So like I was standing up, and I just like basically power bombed him to the ground, and I was like, yeah, like and I remember, yeah, Flood, like my coach ran over and was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You got to go down on top of him." I was like, "You would have died." I didn't think that was a better option. You know what I mean? Like I thought, I'm like, I was allowed to go down on him. I would have thought that would have crushed his lungs or something. But yeah, apparently, you know, obviously you're not allowed to throw people in wrestling. But that was what happened there. So I just, yeah, that was that. That was the end of my wrestling career because shortly thereafter I got kicked out of that school and a bunch of other schools in a row. Like it was a series of issues with behavior. I was always in gifted classes, but I ended up having some behavior issues where I just was very rebellious against authority. And so I ended up in a school where there was a coach. I want to say his name was Mr. Davis, Coach Davis. He was like a teacher coach. He was the coach and the phys ed person, but he taught us about powerlifting. And he taught me how to squat, you know, nothing real fancy, just kind of put a broomstick on your back and keep your back straight. You know, he would like hold it on there, make sure your back was straight, and be like, "All right, squat down." And like,
yeah.
All right, if you can do that, you can squat. It took about 5 minutes to learn that, and then I started squatting regularly. And we had high school records like within the school too, and that was what, like I had the bench record. That was the stuff that motivated me to keep pushing and being competitive with it, because in school it mattered. Like they didn't have like a geared record or something like that. It was just what people could bench press.
Yeah.
So like, or what people could squat, what they could deadlift. And I want to say, I think I had the deadlift too, but I definitely had the bench for that school. And as it would creep up, there was another guy that was pretty strong. He was really training his ass off. Now, every time he would break my record, like he would train so hard and be there all the time, and like he would break my record a little bit, and then Davis would pull me out of class and be like, he broke your record. Do you want to take a shot at
You
it?
want back in? You're like,
Do you want to? He'd be like, do you want to beat it real quick? And I'm like, because the trick was like the reward was that they would announce it over the loudspeaker that the record had been broken for the school, and it's your name. Yeah. So like, it was kind of a back and forth thing. Now this dude, every time he would beat it, before they could announce it, I would beat it again. So he'd be like waiting for his name to get announced, and then they would announce mine again and be like, he broke his own record.
That is so true. I love that. The fact you got a teacher in there as well, like, hey, come on, let's kick this kid's ass.
From a coaching standpoint, I understand exactly what he was doing. I didn't at the time, but it's one of those things that later on I realized that like some people need positive reinforcement and some people need negative reinforcement, you know? And I knew that that's what was keeping the other kid doing it. I remember his name. I don't want to say it, but that's what kept him doing it, was that he was like, oh, like where if he could have just got it, it probably would have been enough. But because every time I was able to just scoop back in and like really kind of just half-assing, I guess, I was able to still do it, which is genetic. It's a genetic predisposition. It's a talent. It's not something that you really earn more than other people. The fact that I started early allowed that to develop a little earlier than it does usually, I think. But other than that, I mean, there's nothing special about the fact that I was able to do it. It's just interesting to see how that coach played us off of each other in that way, where he was like, to me, he was like, hey, come on, you want to do this? And to him, he was like, oh, I can't believe he beat you again, you know? Like, it was like, you just keep it going, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but that's what he needed. That was what he needed. And sometimes, yeah, it's weird. You know, people's motivations are odd in that way. You don't really know what's going to get somebody going, but until you get to know them as a person. I've had lifters that over the years I've worked with where I had one female who was really good. She was elite. She was a top level lifter. And she only responded to negative reinforcement. Like, you couldn't be like, wow, you did so good. It would have to be like, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that. Like, you think you can do that? Like, I would just like doubt, you know, try that. And then they get that whole, like, you know, certain people have that rebellion, that spirit where they're going to teach you, that they can do it. And I'm like, good, show me, you know. That's good. That's what I want to see.
As long as you're making progress, I'm gonna say anything I need to just keep this ball rolling forward. And like, I think that's a really smart thing about coaching, isn't it? Is like, not one person is ever going to respond the same, which means that every single person is going to need their own different way and methodology of getting into their head and getting into their psyche. Because like you said, you didn't even realize what was happening, but you were being brainwashed from a young age to do exactly what you needed to do. And it's like, man, when you can find that at that age as well, that's a big old step up. Because when you know what positively reinforces you, you then just subconsciously start seeking that out, and you start training and lifting with other guys that are the same or the opposite. So then you have what you had there, where you just create that competition, and it's like, okay, let's go.
But I think if I had to like extrapolate the lesson for myself from that, it was that like the power of someone else having confidence in you and what that can do. You know, because like for me, it was him going like, "Are you ready? Come on, why don't you just come down and break this real quick?" You know, and I'm like, it wasn't even a question of can you do it. It was like, come on, why don't you just, like, he hates when you do this and it's so easy that he's been training for that and then you just blow by it because you weren't even testing maxes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
that
I'm
teacher,
like,
that must have been incredible though. Like to see that talent in you. Like if you think about, you had someone like you now, and how much that must get you G'd up as a coach. For him, he must have been like, this kid's not even trying, and he's smoking everyone.
Well, it was, you know, I wondered in my head, was he doing that because he really knew that I was going to be able to do it, or did he know that I was going to respond to that sort of encouragement? And I did obviously respond to it. And I mean, if you look at the results, it was manifest. It did work out for the best. Those records are still there. So I stopped by that school maybe 10 years later, and I already was working in the field, you know, in sports science. And I talked to him, and he knew who I was and everything. He had seen me on the internet and little things, and he was like, "Oh, it's so good to see that you're doing this and that you're involved in this now." And
wow.
Yeah, so it was cool. And I looked, and the records, like, they're literally written with magic marker on a like poster board.
Yeah.
And it was still a record. It was still there. I was like, this is amazing. Like, it was just such a moment in time where that was happening, the back and forth. And that's what drew me to competition, I think. That's what first conditioned me for it. And now when I got out of high school, I say, you know, there was an interview, I saw a video of myself getting interviewed at nationals in bodybuilding. And I was telling the story about how I did powerlifting in high school, and the bodybuilding seemed like the next logical step. And I wasn't saying that like, you know, in a tongue-in-cheek way. I really believed it was at that point, because there wasn't really any avenue for raw
Yeah,
power. It wasn't
yeah, yeah,
really,
yeah. There
you
wasn't the
didn't
time.
get any. No. And like in bodybuilding, I look at the weights I was using in bodybuilding, and whoa, like more than I ever did when I went back to powerlifting, even because at that point I was older, you know. And also when I did bodybuilding in the off season, I was like 330 pounds. So that's that's another part of it. Like I was a giant monster of a human. So it's not really surprising to be able to handle those poundages.
Mass
But
moves
like,
mass, right?
it really does. There's something to it. Now, that's not to say like, you know, like a Jay Cutler or somebody who trains exclusively for aesthetics is going to be strong, because I'm sure, you know, many of them are not, you know. And I found that out also in bodybuilding when I came from a strength background. So I set up my training. It was pretty similar to fist set training, actually, what I did for bodybuilding, with a little bit more emphasis on uh, volume, maybe a
Yeah.
little more emphasis on different exercises. And that was how I got the volume. So in other words, I'd still do the main movements, but then I would do like maybe only 2 sets each for like 4 or 5 movements after that were very intense.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? It was, I figured that if I only can recover from 12 really hard working sets, it should be 6 different movements. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so that I'm hitting everything. And from a standpoint of like, you know, cross section with fibers, that makes sense. You know what I mean? Doing the most inroad possible, the most stimulus possible would be to hit everything from a different angle, you know. But I knew that if I was to just annihilate from every angle, I couldn't recover from that, and that wouldn't benefit me. So I actually erred on the side of caution with my bodybuilding training in terms of the total amount of work I did. And I think that allowed me to, well, towards the end I did. In the beginning, I was asinine with it. I was doing like sets. I was doing multiple sets of 12 deadlifts and stuff like that, which I think was not necessarily beneficial. But you know, it's just
Yeah,
like
yeah, man. Yeah. Thank
maybe
God for
not
hindsight.
optimal. Not optimal. You know what I mean? I should say, yeah. But at that time, it was just about like, I would find things. If I found something to be difficult, I would not allow myself to make excuses. You know what I mean? I'd be like, oh, that's why I'm trying to find a way to rationalize not doing this. You
You
know?
go against
So,
your own subconscious. You're like, hey, man, shut up, okay?
yeah, yeah. I would have to have pep talks with myself. But yeah, I mean, as time went on, and I realized that bodybuilding was not for me. I wasn't really. I was kind of lost at sea at that point when I realized that like I had grown up looking up to bodybuilders, and like that these people were these. I thought they were these beacons of health, and you know, and in actuality, that was not the case. And that, you know, the people who were my heroes became my peers, and they weren't what I thought at all. Nothing was what I thought at all. These were just, a lot of them were just drug addicts and that looked good.
Dude, and
You know?
how much of a
And,
trip is that for like a young guy coming up? Like, it's so important that we have these role models that are setting the tone for these young men and women going forward. Because like you said there, it's like when you grow up and you just feel like you've been fed like a lie, and you're like, what the hell is this? And then if you've been doing that, you kind of feel like you're then part of that identity, and you're like, like, I don't like the way this feels, and it makes you want to get away from it. And it's like, I don't
I had
know,
a, I
man.
had a, I had a sort of moment of disenchantment, you know, where I often describe it as saying I felt like, you know, did you ever see The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
At the end of when the Mighty Oz, when they pull back the curtain and they see him like working the levers, it's like this little man, it's like this little weak old man like working the levers, and the smoke's coming out and
Yeah.
stuff, you know. And that was what I felt like. It was like a moment of revelation where I'm like, wow, these people are not what I thought they were, and these things are actually, you know, not good, and they're hurting me, and they're not helping me, and they're not helping other people. And I mean, you can argue to some degree that I knew that while I was going into it. I guess you make excuses and you make compromise.
Yeah.
It's easy to drown yourself by degrees with compromises. You know what I mean? And that was kind of what I did. And then eventually it was, okay, well, what's the point of the pretense now? And then I realized like, this is not what I want to do or who I want to be. And so when I lost that, my identity at that point was, you know, what I did. I was a bodybuilder. Like, that was my identity. That was what I identified with more so than anything else. I'd abandoned, you know, the pursuit of a career in medicine for the pursuit of a career in bodybuilding. And like, it just kind of, it was a very different, I found myself in my, you know, mid-20s, and I was like, I was lost at sea. You know, I ended up going to prison. I ended up falling into into criminal activity and that lifestyle. And yeah, I definitely lost my way, you know, but in retrospect, I can see that, you know, God used those things to shape me, and those experiences to kind of, to make me who I am now. And so that I can help other people that are dealing with the same stuff, you know. It's
Hell
kind of,
yeah,
there's
man.
always, there's a reason, you know. You got to always ask yourself, like, why, you know, and not like why where you're like screaming at the sky, like why, but why where you're like asking yourself, like, what could this be for? What purpose could this have in my
Yeah.
life? The suffering, the suffering or the mistakes I've made, how could this be used for good? And in my experience, if you ask yourself those things, or if you seek those answers sincerely, you know, God's faithful to reveal that stuff to you. You know, it definitely has been the case for me. You know,
Yeah, but that's it, man.
so,
That's incredible that you obviously know at first, because hence why you kind of fell into that. But to have that foresight to be like, okay, this is my situation. This is this is what's happened. What am I? What am I going to do next? Like, what am I going to do now? How am I going to move forward? Like, what is the purpose for this? Why have I had to go through this? And what have I got to learn about myself to then move forward as a human being? Because, dude, like, when none of us are given the answers on day one, hell no. We're just given millions and millions of freaking questions that we have no idea what are the answer to. And for a lot of people,
most of us don't even.
yeah.
Most of us don't even. We're not even given people that have the answers. You know what I mean? To
Well, that's
ask.
exactly what I
So
was going to say. Like loads of these people that don't have the mums and dads about that, you know, that don't give them that guidance. It's like, what do these kids do then? Well, they then turn to the streets and they learn this for themselves. And then, you know, you have the opportunity where you know, it's the redemption arc, or you're not going to be around
yeah, I
very
mean,
long. You know what I mean, man? And to be able
that's
to come out the other side, that's crazy.
that's my experience too. You know, was that, you know, you learn from, or you embrace what you're around. You know, which was the street. And you know, I knew that I had certain skills and I had a value, but it wasn't my true value. You know, and I had things that I could do, but they were things I could do because I had been conditioned from, you know, a lifetime of exposure to those elements, and not having a very holistic understanding of my role in things, where I needed to be. You know what I mean? I kind of felt that that was my talent, was more darkness, was more the bad things. And I realized, like, you could have those abilities, those capabilities, and that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean that that's your calling. You know, I think that's a misuse of potential. It's a misuse of
Yeah.
gifts. You know, and it's easier. It seems easier. It's actually not easier. It's easier at first, you know, but yeah, it's really easy to give into that sort of self worship, like, where you are the center of the universe and everything revolves around how things affect you. And when you take yourself out of it and you learn to take your own ego out of it, everything becomes more clear. Everything becomes a little easier to chew up and swallow. You know?
That's it. It's exactly what you said. It's that three-letter word, man. It's that ego. And, you know, you either get ego checked because someone bigger and badder and uglier and stronger comes along and puts you in your place, and you're like, okay, well, or like the route that you go down and you kind of get caught up with the law, and then you kind of have it from that end of things. And it's like, but eventually that ego is going to get checked. You know what I mean? El Chapo got it.
Yeah.
The biggest of the
Well,
big guys got it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you're not going to escape it, thinking you're, you know, you're untouchable.
I don't think there's there's any circumstance in the world that can force you to get it, though. That's the problem. Like, prison is full of egos. You know, like, it's this,
But it's
you
a
know, they
journey.
thrive.
I think learning to let go of your ego that's the journey. It's not the destination. It's like that is something that takes a long time to be able to do. And the bigger your ego was at the beginning, the longer the journey is to get rid of it.
It's a process for sure, you know. again, like for me personally, like what that looks like is faith that it's part of something bigger, that it's part of a plan that I may not fully be able to understand or articulate, but that doesn't make it any less important or true. And when you just accept that, everything gets a lot easier. You know, this is part of something greater. You know, I know who I'm working for. I know who I'm serving. And then that's it. That's really it. That's all you have to do. That's the simplest version of it. Obviously, there's unlimited complexity to it, and you can take it as far as you want in terms of you know, analysis. Like there's obviously multiple levels of analysis, and I think it's common for something to have a different valence at different levels of analysis. So like something might look good on the surface. Like I'll give you an example, like you're eating a piece of chocolate cake, like you see some chocolate cake, on one level, that's got a very positive balance because you're hungry. Chocolate cake has a lot of calories. It'll keep you alive. It'll sustain you, you know, but if you're somebody who's obese and has heart disease, you know, then on a different level of analysis, that has a very negative balance because it's high in cholesterol and it's high in calories and it's high in saturated fats and a bunch of other things that are going to, you know, that you need to avoid personally. So it really is about like how much depth you're willing to look at, like how many different levels
layers
you're willing
deep
to
are you going to go?
Most things are ambivalent. Yeah, most things are ambivalent. You know, most things have more than one balance, you know? So then it's a matter of weighing the pros and cons. And I think that's a skill that takes time. You talk about like, you know, letting go of the ego. That's something that takes time. But part of it is really understanding why you're letting go of the ego, that you're not capable of assessing these unlimited, because there's an infinite multiplicity of levels of analysis, right?
Oh,
So
hell.
if you say, hey, it's too much, like my brain can only, like, you know, I would consider myself to be like at least a moderately intellectually gifted individual. I know there's a limit to how much I'm able to analyze effectively and without becoming like paralyzed. You know, it's a common saying, you know, paralysis by analysis. Like in lifting, we talk about that a lot, right? Like you overanalyzing what you do. Is this the right? Just do it. Just do something that fits the criteria of what you need for stimulus. But then there are people that have a legitimate need for that analysis, even if it's not doing anything, it's doing something for them in terms of feeding neurosis or something like that, you know. So that's why people do better with different programs with different levels of complexity, you know. I think that's the biggest impact on someone's training, is not necessarily that the certain training is better for them specifically physically. It's just it meets those psychological and emotional needs better, you know.
Yeah, because and like you've said it before, there are many ways to skin a cat. I don't know why you want to skin a cat, but there are many ways to do it.
There's a lot of ways to do it. Yeah, hopefully we don't skin cats, but like if you know, like it's an old saying. I don't know where these sayings come from.
Yeah,
but like,
neither do I, man. Neither do I. It's crazy.
But yeah, it's true. There's more. I believe there's only one best way, though. That's the truth, you know. And when I say best way, I mean that's weighing all of the levels of analysis, you know. Like there has to be something that we can say is, okay, this is enough to give you the stimulus that you need. This is enough attention to complexity. This is enough attention to detail. And more than this will begin to have a negative effect. You know, we'll begin to take away from it. So that's how I would identify what's best. Yeah. You know, but then again, those things may change marginally for the individual. I think we do put a lot more. We like to see ourselves as highly individualized and unique organisms, which we're not. You know, most humans are.
When everyone's unique, no one is.
Right. Exactly. You're right. Well, and like, how much more so is that true with lifting? Because when you look at like so, for example, like what is the there's an analogy I like to use here for this, right? Like you're going to a cardiologist, you know, and you're like, I don't know, something's going on with my heart. Doc, I need you to check me out. And he's like, all right, well, we're going to do this echocardiogram. You're like, whoa. I don't know if that's the right test for my heart, Doc. You know, and he's like, it's the right test. Just shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. It's the right test. Shut up. You know what I mean? Like your heart's not that special. It's not that unique. This is not to say that you don't have a unique and very special value as a person, and there are aspects of your character and you know, that are totally unique, but you're not that special that you have to adjust your training that much. I mean, like, it is, we're far more similar than we are different, you know, as a species, humans. We would like to pretend we're not, you know. Then I feel like half the world is living in a state of make believe anyway. So it's really kind of like this whole.
I think it might be more than half the world, bro. I think it might be more than half the world at this point.
it falls on deaf ears, sadly. But it's a nice, you know, it's a nice thought. It's a nice thought that, yeah, you're right though. I agree with you. It's more than half the world. I'm being generous there. Yeah. But you know, we got to keep having those conversations and talking about it, and then hopefully, eventually, those seeds will fall on fertile ground. You know what I mean?
Well, that's exactly it, man. That's exactly it. Is that for a lot of people, is that they can hear those things, they can hear those messages, whatever it might be, but it might not be the right time for them. Like there would have been times, probably like in your misguided youth, where people spoke about training or people spoke about doing these positive things, but your mind wasn't ready to take that in there. So you had to go through and you had to do all those things. You had to get in trouble. You had to be put in prison. You had to be put into that environment where you were given a very small amount of, ways that you could go down, like paths that you could go down, things that you could get involved with. And then by doing that, you were then presented with that opportunity to do something with it. Like,
you're right. And to some degree, there is that individuality, but you know, it comes with that. If you're going to accept that, I think there's a necessity for submission to the idea that, you know what I mean? There is a sort of, there's something larger that you're part of at play, you know, and that if you accept that, it makes it so much easier to keep rolling and to know that the experiences, the hardships, the adversity, all of these things are friction, and God is using it to polish you for something that you don't even know yet. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even you can't even, like, there's been times in my life where I thought for sure, I'm like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do for a living. I know what I'm going to do with my life, and I'm going to focus on these skills. And like, you develop the skills, and it turns out you were developing them for something else. You know, like, so don't be too rigidly attached to what you think is going to become your identity or your future, because you don't know. That's what I always say that to people. People are like, oh, what about what I want? And it's like, well, you don't know what you don't have any idea what you want. Like, it's good. What you actually think you want now, wait till you get that. You know, seriously, God forbid you get what you want, because it's happened to me before. And then to have that realization that, like, okay, all the things I was working towards, I have them now. I'm here. Like, and then to feel that deflation in yourself, where you realize, like, I thought things would be better now, and they're not. Nothing's different. I'm just as empty. I'm just as hollow. So what do I do now? I focus on a new task, knowing that when I get there, it's going to feel like this. Life becomes a rat wheel, like a running wheel for a hamster.
Yes, exactly. You know what I was going to say. And then it's a downward spiral negative habit, isn't it? So you're just reinforcing the negativity, and you're reinforcing the negativity. So then all you're taking in your subconscious is negativity. All you're giving out to everyone is your negativity, which only then feeds your negativity. And then you just have to get into that, like, then you have to blow up, and then you have to start again.
I heard somebody talking about this, actually, in a way that makes perfect sense to me too. And if you look at it, it applies to everything. Like, people that are successful, if you look at the way their lives are set up, right? And it's not saying like, hey, model your life after people that are successful and you'll be successful. I mean, there might be something to that train of logic, but people that are successful, they typically, whoa. Sorry, dude, someone looked like they were just gonna, this girl with a mask on just looked like she was gonna get into my car. I was like, totally distracting me. Yeah. And I think it was the wrong car, because I'm assuming that there's another gray.
That could have been very fun.
Yeah, that would have been interesting if she opened the door, because I'm sitting here like, hey, I got the visor thing down, so you really. Yes, all right, this is my car. I don't even remember what we were just talking about. Oh, that's what it was. Okay, let me bring it back here. So there was the positive and negative feedback loops, right? So even if you look at this from a perspective of, say, you're a personal trainer, right? And you got one client, you might have one client and you do really good with that one client, and that person can tell other people, right? Now you got, say, 3 clients. Now you got 3 clients, they can tell other people, you got 9 and so forth. So all these positive things can feed more positive things, right? And so that's why someone who's further along, that's already got even some modicum of success, whatever, some amount of success, they have enough resources that when they start to do positive things, other people are like, wow, look at this guy doing positive things. And that feeds in more positive things. And that's a positive feedback loop. But just the way that happens, something goes wrong in your life and you allow that to spiral into where you make another bad decision, right? Be it out of anger or resentment or spite, who knows? You continue to make every one of those bad decisions, just like when you did a good thing, other people saw it and it fed into more positivity and people wanted to help. When you did a bad thing and then you did another bad thing because you were mad about the consequences of the bad thing, all that stuff feeds into itself and gives a negative feedback loop. And that's why when you see people that are always failing, there's certain characteristics that they have that are universally possessed among that group, right? Like that's it. Like they all have that. Like, and that's what that is. They all have that negative, life isn't fair, things were done to me.
Woe is me,
I'm in a position that's unfair. This isn't fairness. Like they do a lot of talk about fairness, but if you see those people and the way that they operate, you'll never see them doing things to be fair for other people. You know what I mean? Like they'll never be concerned about fairness among other people that doesn't involve them. And that tells you all you need to know about the motivations, right? So that is a perfect example of like a negative feedback loop. And those people typically, like they hover, like maybe not at the very bottom because they're loud, and anyone that's speaking loudly, you know, there's a certain amount of people that are going to want to get involved, but they all just sort of tumble around at the bottom for a while. Whereas the people that are at the top, even the ones that's not to say that people who are at the top are going to be kind or even good, but even the ones that are at the top that are all business, you know, when you talk to somebody, it's all business. Like you got 5 minutes, go, you know. But even those people, they know when something's positive to reward it with positivity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They know how that works because that's how they got where they're like, okay, well, what you're saying is good. There's some merit to that. Let's do that. Okay, good. Like they might be rushed and I might feel a little bit depersonalized or whatever, but the end result is that they're just like an effective machine. You know, that's somebody that's like making this is positive, this is good, this is good, this could lead to good, this could lead to good, and they're just rolling. You know what I mean? Those are the ones those are the high producers. Those are the people that will those will be like, for example, economic drivers in an economy. Those are the ones that are going to get things done. They're going to start businesses. They're going to come up with new ideas. You know, they're going to move because it really does revolve around positivity and negativity. I hate to make things as generalized as that because what's
no, but
positivity?
I think it all does stem from that. It does, like even just for a small amount. And at any one time, there is always going to be a ratio of good to bad. But you can really massively influence that with your environment and your own mental health, and then the principles that you're putting in place for yourself to not let yourself get picked up by all these negative stimuli from day to day, which is so freaking easy to pick up, man. Do you know what I mean? And you pick them up quick, and then it just snowballs, and then before you know it, you're like, wait, I'm having the worst day ever, and it's 7:30 in the morning. What's going on?
It's cancer, right? And so cancer, what does cancer do? It metastasizes, it spreads. It doesn't just chill out and die off on its own ever, right? It spreads. It gets into everything. It gets into the bones, the framework of the whole situation, right? It's kind of like doubt too. I feel like doubt is also a cancer, but that negativity. And now this is an interesting effect here, right? Even when it's not necessarily goodness, but it's positivity, it does seem to have that same sort of, it gets traction and it gets that same sort of feedback effect, right? Like where you hold the microphone in front of a speaker, that kind of feedback, it's just louder and louder and you can't, it's a screeching, horrible noise. But like, it does have that, like even with like, so we hear these terms now like body positivity and sex positivity and all these other things where it's like, okay, well, you know, like the idea of like healthy at any size and these things that we just know are untrue from a scientific standpoint. Like there's not really
it's true, which is why it's painful for us.
Right. Like when you see the stuff and you read, like, and you'll say like, this is healthy, like the pictures on magazines, and it's like, but based on what?
Yeah,
like,
your ECG results would say something completely different to what this lady writing this article has said. It's like,
I'll put it to you like this, right? I would be more receptive to it if next to the picture, if they had like a lipid profile for that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
what do your lipids look like, right? What's your blood sugar look like fasted,
It's like top
right?
trumps, like
Yeah,
average Joe and whatever, and it's like cholesterol, average heart rate.
yeah, because there is a statistically significant difference in health at various body weights, and so much so that like that's what insurance is based on, right? So they have the largest bank, the largest wealth of data of anyone is insurance companies, because their entire deal revolves around being able to regulate how much you can charge somebody based on the likelihood that they're going to have a sickness. So they don't care how you look. They're looking, you know what I mean? They're going with statistics. Statistics don't have feelings. Like, it's not even a matter of that.
Yeah.
So I do feel like, I'm not saying that anyone should be judged based on their size or their appearance, but this is a good example of misleading the public. You know, like, you are at risk if you don't have diabetes or heart disease yet. Like, you will, and sooner than you would. You know, that's not to say that you're less of a person, or you have less value to God, or you have less value to provide to the people around you in your life. But I mean, if you care about yourself, you have to have a certain amount of honesty that stays in the mix. Like, you have to be honest with yourself. And we're not only not being honest with ourselves, we're not being honest with each other. We're pretending like, you know, it's like the same as saying like, oh, well, cats are dogs. Like, well, they're not. You know what I mean? Like, they're just as good as dogs. You could argue that you're a cat person, you're a dog person, but cats aren't dogs. And like, being 400 pounds is not the same thing as being 200 pounds. You
Even
have
if you
kidneys, you're a human
feel
being.
like you feel like at 400 pounds that you feel as good as you think you would feel at 200 pounds, you don't know that, because you're not 200 pounds. You're 400
Even
pounds.
even if you're not, you know, I'm not dead yet. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you're not dead yet. I guess that's a good argument. But like, let's take a look at, you know, many people that are 400 pounds at 70 years old. Can
I
you
don't
think of
think
one?
so. I don't think so.
Right. So that's my point, right? So that's my point. And so if we go with that, then obviously you're going to die sooner when you're heavier, right? You're going to suffer sooner with the ailments that are associated with the end of your life. The end of your life problems are going to show up at 40 instead of 65.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which, when you're 40, like, I'm 40, you're supposed to still be living and enjoying your life. You're supposed to still be healthy. You know what I mean? There are situations where that's not the case, but it's avoidable in many cases. The more we learn, the more we know. We can't just pretend we don't know those things because they're, you know, they're not kind to a certain group of people, or they're not as. Honestly, I don't even want to say they're not kind. I think that the kindest thing you can do to someone is tell them the truth. And, you know, obviously do it in a way that's not judgmental of them as a person, you know. And again, like, I'm not judging people or what led them to where they are, but I can tell you, I'll give you a really good example. I used to work with a lot of obese women. I even had like a women's boot camp type thing, right? And I did a lot of
Yeah.
weight loss. I've had 13 women lose over 100 pounds, and I've had like 5 women that lost 200 pounds, right? One of them was
Wow.
on my team, and one of them was on my powerlifting team at one point, where it turned out she was actually good at lifting, and losing that weight was pushed in a different direction. I think she met her husband on my team, and they got married, and they have kids, and they're off. I don't even talk to them anymore. But
That's so sick.
so the reason I actually bring this up is, she was part of a family that came to me. It was a mother, her sister, and her, and they were all, you know, they were all obese. They were all quite obese. And she was actually about 400 pounds when she started. I think she was 408 pounds. They all lost a lot of weight. Mother got taken off of diabetes medication altogether, just from losing weight, just from lifting weights and training and so forth, you know. So like, that right there should be a pretty good indicator that you're not healthy at any size, if we can change your size and it has a dramatic impact on health metrics, right? So like, common sense there, right? So, and lying to the public and saying that this is healthy is wrong, you know. And I don't know, like, I don't understand how it's considered conscionable. I really don't. I don't understand how people are okay with this or getting behind it, because it's, again, like, if you were saying like that your value was the same, I'm all for it, clap. If you're saying that you have every right to still wear certain outfits, I'm like, yeah, okay, go for it, feel good about yourself. But if we're gonna play pretend now, we're gonna live in a pretend world where all the things we know are actually not facts. They're just like inconvenient things that we're gonna ignore when they don't tell us what we want.
Yeah.
Like,
You can't ignore the laws of science when it suits you.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that we look at it like a menu. You know,
Yeah.
like science is a menu. Like, I'm pro science. Like, you got to believe in science. Don't be a science denier. But then like, oh, but these parts of it, like, no, I don't want. Just give me this and this. You know, it's like,
But
no, it
dude,
doesn't work that way.
but it's the exact same thing with like the veganism standpoint and whatever. And people are make these ridiculous, outrageous claims and whatever, saying that they're on like this scientific standpoint, and you're like, okay, but within that, all of the facts and figures that you're reading isn't true. You know, it's from a
No.
source that isn't viable. It's from a study that wasn't complete properly, and it's like, so
Yeah.
even then it becomes difficult. You know what I mean? Like, it is a real
Yeah.
minefield, and to be able to operate your way through it is difficult. And this is why often a lot of times we can't necessarily do it by ourselves, because we can think that we see through
Is it
something, but we
impossible?
need someone else.
Is it impossible to do well as a vegan and still lift and so forth? No. Is it hard? It's harder. Yeah, it's much harder. It's harder just from the fact of the matter that you actually are going to have a much more difficult time organizing meals. Like, right here, you know what I mean? I'll give you an example. I got like 60 grams of protein on me right here that you could not have if you were vegan.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so much easier. It's so much easier from that standpoint. The world is set up to not do that. And again, when you're looking at, like, if you're going to compare a group of people that are living a certain lifestyle to others, you know, you have a very small minority of the population that's involved in that, like a fractional percentage of the population. So you don't really have enough data. And when you get more data, a clearer picture emerges. So, like, under ideal conditions, could this work? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Is it going to be harder for you to do that? Is it going to maybe be impossible for you to do that if you have a normal life? Yeah, that's also very possible. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah. And I mean, it's like, to what degree do you do it? But I mean, veganism is obviously, at that point, that's tough. You know, it's harder. And I'm not making any sort of moral judgment about it, or what have you, or what motivations are right or wrong to have in pursuing something like that. But you have to understand that when you're taking that on your back, you're taking on more work than you would otherwise. It's going to be harder. It's not going to be easier. It's not like you just adopt a vegan lifestyle and now your heart disease is going to go away.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. It's not like you just adopt a vegan lifestyle and now you're not going to get heart disease. Absolutely not. In fact, there are plenty of plant sources like palm oil, for things that are just still going to have the same
Bro,
effect.
French
You know what I
fries
mean?
are still vegan. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, consider it from that standpoint. Like, yeah, I mean, and if you break it down even further, like vegetarian, like basically most foods that are junk foods are still vegetarian. You know, you can live on only those. You know what I mean? And still be following a vegetarian diet.
Yeah.
So again, it's like there is no simple category change that will resolve all of the issues in something that is as convoluted and complex as nutrition. You can't just say, oh, I'm just going to omit this certain food group and everything will be okay. It's really more about having a holistic understanding of many factors. And like most complex issues, this is something that's multifactorial. So it's not like there's just one cause. There's no single cause. You couldn't possibly. Yeah, I mean, I think that anyone who's worth their weight is not going to ever try to pursue eliminating a single cause, you know, as going to be as a recipe for, or a solution for a problem.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that could work. You have to understand that there's so much at play. Like, it would be like telling people to do cardio to lose weight. Like, cardio stimulates appetite, so you're going to eat more. So if that's the only thing you're looking at, you're probably going to gain weight. You know, there's a lot at play. There's a lot to consider, and all of these things, I think, are like, the fitness industry is a microcosm for the rest of the world. I think that all these problems sort of leach out and seep into everything else. And it's if you use the same problem solving tools, you can solve these problems and those problems alike.
Dude, 100%. I always say this it's like the gym is a reflection of our own lives and stuff that we're doing. Do you know what I mean? And the problems that we are faced with in the gym environment will condition us to be able to conquer ultimately more outside of the gym, because we are training. We're training, and what happens when you train, you make adaptations and you get better at stuff if you're training correctly, which is a whole different topic in and of itself. But if you're doing that,
yeah, the psychological component of that too, you know, not just the physical adaptations, but learning.
oh dude, I think
Like,
the
trying things that
psychological
don't work
is
and learning.
the biggest thing that you take away from it, right? Because, well, I mean, like for you,
100%.
you obviously you always had that switch in your head, and you always had that, you know, that ability to be aggressive with the weight or on the street or whatever it is. But then being able to bottle that and utilize that at the right moment in the right situation with the right pretense following it gives you the correct result. Where there are many times where you want to go off like a rocket, but it isn't the time and you miss it. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, damn, now I've created all of these problems rather than actually being able to execute the one task that I wanted to freaking do in the first place.
Right, which is probably, that task is probably the reason that you have those things inside of you. You know, whatever the correct application is probably the reason that you have those talents. You know, like even if you think about like Jung and shadow integration, and the idea that like you may have negative aspects of your character that are there for a reason that's not negative, you know, that are there to serve a positive purpose, and you have to learn to integrate those aspects of who you are, you know, in a way that is going to be healthy psychologically, emotionally, maybe, you know, obviously spiritually is a big concern for me too. And once you do that, you're free of them. They're helpful, they're useful. When you deny them or just cut them off or push them away or don't, you know what I mean, don't acknowledge them, then they show up on their own, autonomous. And, you know, when you're drunk or when you're angry or when you're tired.
Yeah.
Or
And now
anything,
what? What are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? It's like, well, you can't run.
you're going to do
So
what you want. You're going to do what it wants you to do. You know what I mean? Instead of having that control and dealing with those things ahead of time and finding ways to integrate those things in a healthy way where it could actually be serving a purpose that's a greater purpose and not a momentary selfish whim, you know,
which is so
ego,
easy to
what
do.
have you. Yeah. I mean, you're right. It's extremely easy to do. It's not easy to live with though. So like, this is a good example of things on the short term being easy that make things on the long term very hard. Almost nothing that is easy or rewarding on the short term is any good on the long term. You know, think of it that way. I think that's a good general rule, a good rule of thumb. If something is going to be easy for me to do and fun and rewarding right now, it's probably going to derail things that would take longer. Like,
Yeah,
so a good
short-term
example.
gain, long-term pain, or short-term pain, long-term gain. You've got to choose which side you want to play.
Everything in life, but I mean, even in training, like look at taking maxes in the middle of a training cycle randomly and just because you want to feed your ego, or you want to have something to post on Instagram, and it's like, okay, well, you have your reward. That's it. You know what I mean? It's gonna cost you everything moving forward. Is gonna get screwed, potentially gonna derail an entire, you know, macro cycle. You know, the whole training cycle is gonna go in the toilet so that you could have 30 seconds of glory, you know. And it's stupid. It didn't even mean anything. It wasn't even a meet. It doesn't even count. You know what I mean? Just want to make sure that I'm making. Just want to make sure that I'm making progress. I don't know what happened there. It just kind of did some. Did it block you for a minute?
Yeah,
Other things.
The video dropped for a second, but it's all good, man. It's all good.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you got the meat of what I was saying there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Cool.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like when we really think about all these different opportunities that we're presented with, all these different opportunities to learn on a daily basis about ourselves and our environment and how we interact between them both. It's pretty crazy. And I think, you know, the gym is an incredible resource and tool for people to really help take that journey of self-discovery. Do you know what I mean? Like, we learn a hell of a lot about ourselves when we are at the bottom, when we're beat up, when we don't think that there's anything else left to give, and someone comes along and goes, hey, like, you got more in you and you're going to do it, and you're going to prove to yourself that you can do it, and you do it, and it's like, wow. It just goes to show that even I know nothing about myself. Do you know what I mean? And then that journey of discovery of, well, how far can I take this? That's when you dig into it, man.
A little encouragement. That's what a little encouragement can do. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to have somebody.
Life.
I'm talking about right now. We're having a conversation about a guy that, you know, I haven't seen, or, well, you know, when that stuff happened, it's 20 plus years ago. You know, and that's the thing, is we underestimate the positive impact we can have You know, we also underestimate the negative impact we can have, which is just as important. But I mean, I think that, yeah, so I'd look at like anytime when someone reaches out to me or asks me for help or asks me for advice or for a minute of my time, if I can spare it, I try to do it, because, you know, I know how it's felt to reach out to people, to have help, you know, to ask, to actually have the courage to ask someone for help and to be denied or not get it. So like, if I'm put in that situation, I'm at least going to take the time to listen to somebody and offer them a word of encouragement, you know, because that is, the positive effects of that are incalculable. And if you look at it like on like a chaos theory level, right? And the same thing goes for the opposite, for not helping when you could. The negative effects are also incalculable. You don't know how far reaching that will go. You know what I mean? You're not taking a moment to be kind to somebody or to give somebody a little bit of encouragement. You don't know what kind of a negative impact that could have on their life and everyone else's life as a result. So, you know, just kind of being mindful, I think, of the impact that we have on people is huge. And it's something that may take, you know, 20 or 30 years of fumbling with it before you really get a handle on what's happening. But once you do, it's a responsibility that you can see very clearly we all have, and only some of us are accountable about, you know?
Yeah, man, and it gets
So,
trippy as well, because like, you know, you think about when you started out, and like I talk about this quite a lot on the podcast, like, man, when you started out with your Hulk Hogan set, like, so your social circle was like however many people you knew in your area. Do you know what I mean? Before you could drive anywhere, man, it was like what? The people from your school, maybe the kids from your hood. It's like now, man, you wake
yeah,
up at like 6 a.m., you open that up and you got 20,000 people that are sending you messages and videos and whatever. And it's like, then when you get
I
up to
take
that
that.
level, it gets crazy.
I take that as, you know, and I didn't. I kind of took it for granted for a long time, but I take that as a responsibility. I look at it like God has given me those people to influence. You know what I mean? And there's a reason that that's the people that they are. It's a very sick, it's a sick group of people. I'm not saying that in like from a place of judgment, like, oh, you're sick, but I mean like people that are just struggling with things that are easily resolvable, you know, and they're sick and they need a physician. And so how can I be in a position where I have an influence over a large group, like you said? You know, it's a modest group in reality, but, you know, in the scheme of things, but it's much larger than maybe typical. How could I be in a position of influence over those people and not help them when I have what they need? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I know, like, hey, I've been in that same sick situation and I can help you. And so I try to do it. You know, the thing is, it's gotta be scalable, because for a long time I was answering every DM directly. I was
And that kills you as
taking
well.
time. I would get up in the morning and I literally would spend 40 minutes every morning, 45 minutes or so, responding to DMs for everyone that had questions about my method, you know, because I wanted to make sure that they were okay to run it. And it's thousands of people and there's no limit to the amount of questions I'll get. So then I realized my heart's in the right place. I want to help these people and answer them, but I have to find a way to do it, you know, so that would be, you know, that's going to help more people at once. So that was when I started doing the questions and stuff on my story. And that way, like, you know, I get on average about like 4,000 or 5,000 people see the story, you know? So like if I answer a question on there, it might be 4,000. Honestly, when I'm doing all the questions, it'll drop. It'll go down and be like 3,000, 4,000. But that's 4,000 people all heard me answer that question, not one person. And a lot of them are the same questions. Like if you've ever watched regularly when I do the questions, like I probably get 100 questions every time I put the box up. I'll maybe do 25. And if you listen to one time to the next, maybe 5 of that 25 will be the same question next time. And it's just the same. There's always the repeated questions. And I remember talking to Dave about this, Dave Tate, years ago. And what we said was like, you know, you might answer 100,000, 200,000 questions in your career as a coach, but they're the same 50 questions.
Yeah.
Answering them thousands of times, you know, and that's the truth. So I wanted to, like, the same concept with the method. I wanted to answer those questions and have them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to farm questions from Instagram, and I'm starting a YouTube channel and a podcast over there. And
Yes.
I'm going to put like a resource on there for people so they can search, you know, an indexed searchable answer to each question. So that way I can just direct them to that because I've already answered all these questions a million times. So there you go. There's a good explanation of what this is. I'll get into a little more detail than I could in a 15, 30 second or so answer. You know, I get in a little more detail and do individual videos for all those. So I think that'll be, you know, then there's no limit to how many people can see with each question I answer because my time is limited. You know, we only have so many hours in the day.
And you're only one guy. Do you know what I mean? Like you're the way that you do things is so beautifully, authentically you and just you. You don't have this team of like 20, 30 people doing all this programming underneath you that you could just shovel onto all this other stuff. Like you have some of these really, really big influencers that are like, okay, I'm getting on board with training with this person, but this person isn't even training me. So you have to question like, what's the point? But like people sitting here listening to this podcast, like listening to you answer all of those questions, I sit here and I go, I don't know how many people I know that would have that kind of obsession to go through and keep on doing that. And for me, that screams out, okay, this is someone that desperately wants to get better as a coach, but he also wants to get better at communicating as well. And it's like, well, those two things together make you a great coach. And it's you know, it's no like there's no luck involved in you being coach of the year. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the foundations that are set, because man, there are so many people that train people that don't care about people, that don't care. And it's like the people that do and the people that put in that time, man, they're the people that are going to go far. And they're the people that are going to actually change people's lives. You know what I mean?
Thank you for saying that, first of all. But actually, like, it's funny you say this about about like famous coaches like Kevin. I know of people that are literally doing a paid internship where they pay like $10,000 to intern for some coach. And what they're getting in exchange for that money that they're paying for the internship is they're doing all of his online coaching work. Like, so people think that he's their coach, and it's actually interns talking to him and grading their stuff and responding.
Yeah.
Where like
it's just
the degree of
this. Shake your head, man. It's so sad to see.
The dishonesty is rough, man. You know, and everything is marketing too. People are trying to sell a certain image, or they're trying to, like, what they'll do is like these headhunters where they'll like try to attack people that are successful. You know what I mean? And like, okay, well, guess what? Like, everybody knows that when all you do is talk about other people and like trash their stuff, talk about yourself, because it's pretty clear that you don't have anything to say about yourself. What you're offering, what are you bringing to the table? Like, you're never going to see me like just critiquing someone else. Like, okay, I might, if we're having a conversation about sports science and a specific training philosophy comes up, and I might point out some issues that I see with it. Certainly if I'm asked directly, then I will. But you're never going to see me like spending time and doing research so that I can like try to make less of someone else's way of doing things. Like, it either works or it doesn't, man. And it's pretty obvious at this point, if you know who the person is, there would have been a whole ton of people going, this doesn't work, this isn't good, if truly it wasn't. But there's a lot of our industry is plagued with scientism, you know, not science, scientism, like where it's almost like a weird religion of how can I take what is a relatively simple concept and make it into something so complicated that you need me. Like, you got to pay me to know. You better, I'll send you your workout for next week, because you better not. It's not like, if you can't predict what someone's going to do within a certain range, if you can't predict what their recoverability and adaptability is within a certain range, and they're paying, like,
why are you here?
Why are they paying you? Like, you're just guessing. You're just you're going to see, oh, they did good. Okay, now I'm going to change this. Like, in my opinion, I mean, I would say that your performance within training is really only useful in as much as it's a useful predictor of how much fatigue you're accumulating, right? So it's a good sign of when you need to back off. But it's not like you're getting so strong within a training cycle that I need to maximize your training benefit by increasing or decreasing the amount of weights that you're going to use or how hard things. It's like, dude, there's a valley between what you need to do, right, in order to get the adaptations that you want, right, and what you're capable of doing in a given session. And if you're hanging out and flirting on this side, you're messing up. That's all there is to it. You're flirting with danger. You're going to get injured. You're going to railroad your success, because there is a point of diminished return, and it's like right around here. It's not all the way over. Even though you can do more in a session, you shouldn't ask yourself, what can I do? You should ask yourself, what's going to benefit me the most? What's optimal, right?
Yeah.
Because there is a huge difference between what's optimal and what you're able to get done in a session. Because I could kill myself in a session. You know what I mean? I could probably do like 50 lifts at 80% in a session. What's that going to avail me though? Injuries. So that's it. It's nothing more than, you know what I mean? Like doing 20 lifts. Right. Exactly. Doing 20 lifts at 80% would avail me the same adaptations and none of the injuries. So, you know what I mean? How much do you really need to adjust beyond that? You should be able to predict to some degree. So the idea that it's like, oh, well, I'll send you next week's training after you do this is like, to me, is a marketing mechanism more than anything else.
Oh,
is to keep people paying.
100%.
Because then they're like, oh, well, I don't even know what I would have to do next week because I would have to pay him to find out, or after these next 2 sessions, I'm not. And that's literally, it keeps people on the hook. But my whole thing is this, like, I have people that I've been coaching that I've been working with directly, like even in online coaching for 10 years more, maybe at least 8 years for online, and they don't leave. And it's not like they couldn't leave at any point and figure out how to do the programming themselves, because I've written multiple books on the subject that are instructional, and we know what they're going to do next. They'll even say like, hey, so am I going to go back to do this? Yeah, let's do that again, and we'll change this. Yeah, that's called teaching. The other thing is trickery. It's not teaching. They're not learning anything because they don't even understand why they're doing what they're doing. In fact, most of the time, the coach doesn't understand why they're doing what they're doing. It's just something different. You know what I mean? It's just, oh, we'll just change this. And then the more complex it seems, and the more various devices you include in the mechanism for training, then the higher the likelihood that the client's not going to be able to figure it out on their own and do it on their own. You know, whereas for me, I'd like it to be as simple as possible. I'd like to see clients be able to, there's nothing I like better than when a client has been with me for, a few years or whatever. And they're like, I'm going to try to do, a mesocycle on my own, or they say like, what do you think about me doing this? Like the answer is always, yes, do it. If you're asking the question, the answer is there's a reason. Yes, that means you're ready to start trying. And if you get jammed up, I'm here. I'll still be here. I'm not going to you know what I mean? Like try. I want people to try.
Yeah.
I want them to give it a whirl and see if they can do it on their own. Because most of the time you surprise yourself. The confidence thing is a big piece of it. People hire coaches sometimes because they're not confident in making their own decisions, and that's okay, because that should teach you how to make the decisions correctly. But if you're dealing with someone who's coaching you and they're not talking to you about the hows and whys of the decisions, and also the how to think about it, like the hows and whys of like
why are you doing it this way and not this way?
Yeah. Why does it have to be more complex? You should always be asking why, right? When someone says like, what's the best shoulder exercise? I'm like, well, for what? Like, what's the goal? You know what I mean?
What is the stimulus that you are trying to achieve out of this task?
Yeah. How do I get bigger triceps? How do I get bigger triceps with this exercise? And it's like, okay, well, what do you want the bigger triceps for? Like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, right? Because it's pretty easy to get, honestly, I think that if strength isn't a consideration, then metabolic stress should be used in conjunction with the mechanical stresses. But like, if it is, and you want truly stuff, you really want that type of adaptation where it's going to carry over to strength quickly, then that would be a different route that we would take.
Yeah.
That's why using a methodology, all those questions are already answered. All that stuff's already kind of figured out for you. And then by reverse engineering and figuring out, well, why are we doing this? Okay, oh, that's why? Okay. And then you're in a better position later on because you've seen it working in a working model. You're like, okay, I understand. We're doing this because this will lead directly to this down the road. You know what I mean? This will take longer to get to this if we do it this way, so we won't do that. Or maybe because of the timing and how far away we are from a meet, we will do that. We will do the longer way and then also switch to the shorter way as we get closer, because it'll be more specific and more relevant at that time. So like just the philosophy of understanding why you're doing things. I think that's the biggest thing that you can get from working with a coach, is understanding the why and learning how to make the decisions that you're asking them to make for you. If you ask a coach, like, what should I do with this? And they just give you an answer, that's not good in my opinion. I think they should be explaining to you why. They should say, okay, well, here's what we're going to do, but the reason we're doing this is this. Like the goal is this will help with this, I'm going to tell you to use this cue because it's going to actually help with reversal. And you know what I mean? It's going to make depth more consistent. Things like that. You know what I mean? Like where so they know why they're doing it. They're not just following
I
it blindly.
think that is so important. And the one thing that I will always say to my clients, whether it's online, whether it's face to face, is it's like, I want you to actively question me. I want you to actively be like, why have you put this exercise after this exercise? Because I say to them, if I can't explain to you why I've put that in your program, it shouldn't be in your fucking program.
You're right.
It shouldn't.
You're
But then
absolutely right.
if the client understands what it is that they're going through and why they're going through it, they've got skin in the game. They're now a part of their own process because now they want to learn.
Yeah. I want consistent depth. I want a better reversal. Of course, that's what we're trying to accomplish. So here's how we're going to do it. So that, you know, then they start to put two and two together and you learn, like, it's sort of like a meta thought, like how to think, you know, thinking about thinking, you know what I mean? Like, how are we doing this? How are we making these decisions? So maybe even like meta decision making, like, you know, that's a good way to look at it, I think, because if you don't have that, you're just trying to replicate old decisions, but you didn't really understand why you made them to begin with. So you're only looking at an incomplete picture. You know what I mean? Again, it's the multiple levels of analysis, right? Like on the surface, well, why do you lift weights? You want bigger muscles? Okay, there's that. There's also a lot of other reasons, you know what I mean, that have nothing to do with that. You know, like when I started lifting weights, I wanted big muscles. Like, I'll be honest with you, I don't really care about having big muscles at this point in my life, but it's like, it's just a side effect of something else that I actually have a legitimate need for. You know what I mean? So it works out beautifully in that way. Like, you end up having those things that you wanted initially, and you didn't realize, like, that wasn't even what that's not what was really drawing me towards this. It was something else, you know? So
I think that's the beauty of weightlifting in and of itself, man. We all get involved for some reason, but along the way we pick up and learn and develop so many other things that it becomes so much greater than that one thing that we ever set out for, that we do it for life, because we realize that there is like this endless array of lessons for us to learn and possibilities to help ourselves develop both mentally and physically along the way, because we're always going to be challenged in that environment. A pound is a pound and a kilo is a kilo, and you're only going to be as strong as you can be at that time until you make the adaptations in place to progress. And at that time, you will have to face adversity of your own body not working to the standard you want it to, and then the principles you're going to put in place to gain that extra strength and overcome it. And then the kick you get off of that, man, it's like a drug. It feels so good.
It is honesty. It's accountability. You're forced to be honest. You're forced to be accountable because the numbers don't lie, right? So like what we were talking about before, about like whole like healthy at any size, all that stuff. Okay, but the numbers actually indicate that that's not the case, right? Look, if we look at this, there's a statistically significant difference in health between individuals at different body weights, right? Like, and you can look at that in any way, like from any direction. It's obvious, right? So like, it's the same thing with this. Like, you either lifted that weight or you didn't. Doesn't matter of how you feel, like how much you feel like you can lift, how much can you actually lift? We can narrow it down to a pound. You know what I mean? Like, you can either lift it or you can't. We can get it down to a very precise amount. And like, you either made progress or you didn't. And if you didn't, then that is a useful piece of information that's going to drive you to analyze what you did to get to that point that either worked or didn't work. And that is that paradigm of taking information and integrating it in a way that's going to allow you to make better decisions moving forward. That's what we want to move towards. And sadly, it sucks, but to see society moving the opposite direction. We're like, oh, we have all this information that indicates this thing, but never mind that.
We're going to throw some science-ish stuff at it.
Scientism. That's what it is, you know? It's like, well, the problem is, like, you know, yeah, people believe what they want to believe. That's the other side of it too. We all enter into every situation with our own various cognitive biases, you know, like confirmation bias, for example. We've already decided we want to believe something. So now we're going to take evidence that we come across that supports that, and we're going to lift that up real high and elevate that and magnify it. And anything that goes counter to what we've already chosen to believe. It's like, that's not good. Well, you're not even going to look at that. Yeah, that's garbage. There's some issue with that.
Yeah.
That's a problem. That's, you know what I mean? Now we're basically, we might as well be walking around with our eyes closed.
Yeah.
You know, you have to use the information that we have available, because like that information, like if you even get more specific from information to data, like as you get more data, a clearer picture emerges invariably, right? So if we know that, and we have a tremendous amount of data about, you know, a specific problem or situation, and all the data points in one direction, and we're like, yeah, but I don't like the way that looks. Let's go with something else here that's a little bit, you know, that makes things a little easier for people. That's not, you're lying not only to yourself, you're lying to other people. So now you're doing harm, you know. That same goes for training. Like, sadly, we have people that will put together training that they want to work, and when it doesn't work, they'll still pretend like it did work and that it was someone else's fault that it didn't work, and all these other things. And they'll draw these wild comparisons. You know, like they'll focus on one particular issue and draw wild comparisons and completely ignore 50 other issues that are huge, that are problems, that are going to make the one thing that they're talking about, the one positive response, actually
irrelevant.
They're going to make it negative, because you're not even going to be able to perform. So you have to consider the whole picture, right? Like, who cares if you get stronger within a training cycle, but you're always decimated and injured before you get to the platform?
Yeah, exactly.
What's out of value? Nothing. Right? Nothing, literally. A temporary ego boost. So I think it's cool to look at things the way that we do with FistSet, in terms of looking at a 6-month macro cycle and not trying to really determine if you're making a whole ton of progress within, as long as you're meeting the guidelines, you know, because it's really easy to overthink this stuff. And that's by far the biggest problem that people have, I think, in terms of longevity, is that they get so stressed with overthinking 8 million little things. And then when one thing doesn't go their way, they're like, this is just too much for me to think about. I can't deal with all these. Eventually they end up quitting. When in reality, like, pick a reasonable method of training and train for 5 years. You're going to be really happy with the results. Like, be consistent with it. It's not like you're going to go, oh, I shouldn't have been training these 5 years. I wasted these 5 years training. Like, it's not going to happen. I promise you it won't happen. You know, and as far as people giving you little like tips, tricks, and all these things, it's like, you're focusing on the wrong things. Learn how to lift with good technique. Learn how to lift in a way that's going to provide longevity. But when I say that, I'm not only referring to technique, I'm also referring to the way that you're loading. You know, use something that's going to factor into and account for your recoverability and adaptability, because that is an individual difference to some degree. But if you're doing that stuff, I mean, it's about time. It's about repetition. Time's our friend. Time is going to show us. It's going to reveal everything that we need to know.
But you know what time isn't? Sexy. And you know what sells? Sexy. And that's the issue we have, is that every motherfucker on Instagram is out here trying to sell a 12-week program that promises to add 60% onto their 1RM, and it just doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. It comes
like put 40 pounds. It's flex. It's like the old Flex magazine articles, you know, like put 40 pounds on your bench in 8 weeks. Everybody's like, oh, I want to do this. And it's like,
yeah, sure. And then everyone's got like tendonitis by the end of it. They've got like a whole heap of like tricep overuse issues and whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, man, I managed to get a little bit more out of it. But now my entire body is completely ruined, and I can't bench press for the next 6 months. And then my total goes down by 50%.
And not to mention, like, let's be real here. If that was something that was a reasonable expectation for results from training, right? Like, you could just be like, oh, well, in 2 years, I'm going to have the all-time world record. This is great, right? Come on, like, yeah, at some point there's a disconnect. Like, it's like people buying lottery tickets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, where they buy lottery tickets compulsively every day, and they're just like, oh, you know, think about what you're doing. Where do you think the money comes from for the person that wins? People like you. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. Like, you're the one funding all this. You're going in and putting $20 a day into it. You know, I'm not saying that people never win the lottery, but that's probably not how you're going to do it. If you're going to win, you're going to win. You know, it's a 1 in 20 million chance that you're going to actually win some substantive figure, right? So, like, it is. It's this. They go into it with that same mentality of hoping and dreaming, and it's just such a desperation. You know, it's such like it reeks of desperation. It's like, that's not how to get things done. You know what I mean? To just have an unrealistic hope, and You know, to have it be, let's be real here about what do you hope to get out of a 6-month training cycle. Are you somebody that's already been lifting for a while? Are you are you brand new to lifting? It might be a little more, but if it is, let's be realistic that next time it's probably not going to be, probably not going to put 60 pounds on a lift in 6 months. That's probably a trick you're only going to pull off once, you know? And what about when it's 10? What about when you train for 6 weeks and it's 5? You're going to keep going then? Not if that 60 was what was giving you your motivation. You know, there's a dangerous difference between motivation and discipline. Whereas like motivations change and they wane and they grow and they shift. And one day you could be motivated by one thing. The problem is intrinsic motivation is the only thing that matters. So the stuff that's inside of you, not the stuff where there's external motivation where people are going to clap. That can't be the motivation. If that's the motivation, you're going to fail. You know what I mean? It can't be for other people. It has to be about the way it makes you feel. And if training makes you feel a certain way, it should make you feel that way when you make a 5-pound improvement on a lift over 6 months and when you make a 60-pound improvement on a lift over 6 months. Because the difference between those two things is not as much in your power as you think. You know what I mean? It's a lot of it is going to be genetic predisposition, so higher levels of recoverability and adaptability, which you can't do much to change that. You might be able to improve your recoverability or adaptability by 5-10% just by changing environmental factors, lifestyle choices, so forth. But when you're dealing with someone who in their first year of training is benching 500 pounds, that's not them. They're already, there's no modifying that you're going to do to yourself, whether it be in the form of drugs or getting more sleep or food. You're not going to do that.
Yeah.
What they did, because that's like the difference between a pit bull and a chihuahua. Like there's no amount of drugs that you could give to a chihuahua to make it a pit bull. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. It's just not. And that's not to say that there's not amazing chihuahuas out there that have value and that are good. They are. But like maybe if that's the case and you feel disheartened about that, maybe your identity shouldn't be just that you're lifting. You know what I mean? Maybe there's other things about you that are valuable also. And I would say that's true for the best lifters in the world and people that are just starting out and that are kids. You know, there's nobody who is good enough at lifting that it should be all they are. There's just not. You know what I mean? Because this is a temporary thing. Every fire dies. Every fire dies. Everything has to begin, and you know there's a middle in there where you shine. But like every aspect, every talent, even your health will fade, will go away. You know, and if that's all you are, once that starts, where you're no longer at the best you could be, where there's potential for you to be anymore, you're done. What else do you have to offer? Was your life over? Like, it shouldn't be. You know, there should be more to you than that. This should be part of a life. It should be part of a life that enhances your life and doesn't take away from it. That's not to say that you can't be the best in the world at it. And if you're someone who's in the thrall of pursuing that, where you actually believe you're someone who could be the best ever or close to it or a top competitor, that's not to discourage those people from doing that. But it's important to hold on to the fact that you're more than just that. That's what will get you through the times when things don't go the way you want, right? Like that's when we lose sight of that. Everybody wants to be a savage and show you how tough they are. And this is all I care about. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes. You know what I hear when people tell me they're willing to do whatever it takes to be the best? I'm willing to take drugs. Like, yeah, you and everybody else, dude. It doesn't matter. There is no way to do that. There's no shortcut. There's no amount of drugs you're going to take that's going to, you know what I mean? That's going to make you Dan Green next week. It ain't happening. You know, it's just not going to happen. So, you know, and yeah, I mean, I think it leads to a very unhealthy mindset that inevitably ends in a train wreck. You know, you watch these people's lives fall apart and so forth. And, you know, I hate to see that. You know, but if you find your center and your anchor in the world in something other than just the lifting can be a thing that enhances that. You know what I mean? It can be something that you do and not who you are.
It's a way to express that greater thing that you're trying to achieve.
Right. So in other words, if whether or not you want to do it is dependent on whether or not you could be the best at it, don't do it. Don't do it. Because the people that are the best at it, they know that they have a balance. You know what I mean? They're just, that's all there is to it. Like people that are,
people that are the best are like so incredibly humble with it as well, because they understand that isn't their be all and end all and everything. Like they understand what that thing does and where it fits in their life, and relative to what their life is, on a whole. And I think
Great. Dan Bell, great example. Dan Bell, right, has the all-time world record total now. He's just been, I've watched him from the very beginning. I've been cool with him. We've been talking and interacting from his first or second meet, and to see someone, he's very humble. He's a humble dude. He's not out there like, haha, and the people what's crazy is the people that want to be the best, that so outwardly and vocally want to be the best, you don't see them act that way. You know what I mean? Yeah, they're trying to act like they're the greatest already, and they're going to win, and they're just going to win everything they do. And, there's a lot of ups and downs on every person at the top. Their path, it was very rarely was it just a linear climb. It's usually ups and downs. And to find out who someone really is, whether or not they're going to make it through that, watch them when they have it down, because that might be the last you ever see of them.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've got to get kicked in the teeth a couple times.
Yeah, because that's the thing. That's when everything gets shored up. Well, what else do you have? What else is there in your life? Like, is this the rock that you build everything on? Because it's crumbling. Now, if you have all these other things, you can lean on. If you have other aspects of your life, if you have, maybe family, if you have a good social circle of people that you love and care about, you have other interests that you want to pursue, you have a calling that you feel outside of just that. Not to say you need all of those things, but you need some. Yeah. You need some. If there's nothing but the lifting and that's it, and that's your identity, you won't get very far, because it's really not your identity. You're lying. It's a facade, right? You're trying to convince yourself what you're trying to convince other people, and it'll become clear the first time that you don't have that thing doing what you want it to do. First time you get injured seriously, like the first time you wake up in a hospital bed and realize you have to have spine surgery, right then, whether or not it's over. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, then you're like, okay, well, I'll do whatever I got to do to get by, and I have other things in my life I can lean on until I'm back to normal, or until I can recover. And where you face something that the recovery is 6 months or a year or 2 years, 3 years. Do you keep doing it? Because it's not going to give you it's not going to give you that feedback you want in that time. You're not going to keep getting pats on the back and attaboys, So that's the external reward compared to the internal reward. The external motivation, the explicit motivation instead of the intrinsic motivation. Yeah. The extrinsic is different. When you're dependent on what other people think and what other people will respond to and what you'll get lauded for, you're not going to get lauded for being injured. You're going to get injured. So, I mean, what then? Do you just give into drug addiction or other things, or is there something else in your life that's holding you together? I think that's a big message that people need to hear, is that you need more than just the lifting. In order to be the best at the lifting, you need more than just the lifting. But those are the people that tell you they're going to be the best. I'm going to be the best. I'll do whatever it takes. They seem to think that what it takes is a really singular focus and being willing to sacrifice everything else in your life, when oftentimes doing those things will ensure that there's no way you'll finish the course.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? It's so funny that the people's perceived idea of what they need to do is almost entirely the complete opposite of what they should actually be doing.
It's sad. I hate to see it, man. I really do. I hate to see it, 'cause I know these are people. They're searching, man. They're desperate. These are people that are searching for an identity. They're searching for something that they think they're going to get it from a barbell, and they just won't. It's one piece of the puzzle,
Yeah, it can do a lot for us, a hell of a lot for us, but we need to understand where it lies in the grand scheme of things for you as a human being in your life. Huge. I'm not saying it's not maybe even the most valuable tool to certain people, because it is. In certain cases, it's the thing that's going to direct you, but it can't be the only thing. It can't be that's your identity, that's your sole source, because it's something temporary and you have no control over how temporary it is. You can do things to mitigate the risk of injury, but that's just mitigating risk. You don't really have any control. We're talking about injury, but even if you look at what's happened in the last year and a half, man, with COVID, gyms being shut down, it's like, okay, well, your identity is a powerlifter. Okay, cool. How about not doing any powerlifting meets for a year? The fuck are you going to do then?
Now what? How about not training in some cases? Some people can't. They're doing push-ups.
Yeah.
And if you want to really, if you want a picture of how much people are deriving their identity from lifting and from the gym and from, look at this strange phenomena that happened early in quarantine where everyone was like posting these strange apartment exercise videos. You know what I mean? Like, look, here, you can use a gallon of milk to do this. It's like, are you really that desperate for validation? Like, do you really, like, what, you can't
People
take
leg
weird
pressing their sofas, and you're like, what? Like,
you can't take,
why?
yeah, you can't post weird angles of your butt while you're lifting anymore. So now what, you're going to do in your apartment? Like, tying stuff to poles? Like, it's, yeah, like, you literally, it's so sad. They're like reaching out for that same thing on the internet. Like, please, like, Mike, give me likes, give me validation. You know what I mean? Like, I'll teach you guys how to lift weights still. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's like if there was like an authenticity, if there was a litmus for authenticity, like suddenly, like, it's just everyone's purple. Like, you can see, like, it's just like quick. You know what I mean? Like, oh wow, like, okay, I guess everyone on here is fake, huh?
Right, well, you need to
Like,
get a t-shirt. Everyone's purple.
Everyone's right. Like, yeah, like if it's like the keto strips, like everybody's pissing ketones. It looks like, I don't know, it's purple, right? Like,
Oh shit, that got me.
well,
Oh man, yeah,
this is,
100%.
yeah, man. Well, this is a good conversation, man. This has definitely been real, getting to know you a little bit too.
Yeah,
know?
man, it's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I'm grateful that we were able to do this for a little bit today.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, it's been a hell of a lot of fun. It's been a hell of a lot of fun, man. Now I like to end off the podcast the same with absolutely everyone. It takes like two minutes to do. So I want you to imagine for 1 sec, real quick, you're stepping into a time machine and you're going back in time, and this is going to be very, very prevalent for you. In that time, you step out of the time machine and you're presented with your younger self, 10, 11, 12 years of age, very, very formative years, and a hell of a lot of stuff to come in your future, especially for yourself. So in those few moments that you get to spend with your younger self, you get to impart some wisdom, mantra, a way to live their life, or just some knowledge to help that young man navigate his way through all of the crazy things that life is about to throw at him. What in these last few moments do you give to yourself to help them get through all of that?
What would I give them to help them get through it?
Yeah, like whether that be like verbally, like through knowledge, or a way to live their life, or just some general knowledge to impart to them to help them get through everything that they're about to go through.
Well, I'll put it like this. I know that I wouldn't really want to change it. There's things I regret doing, you know, there's decisions I made that I regret and so forth, but I'm at a place where I see it as a perfect picture, the entirety of it. I see it as, you know, this is all a continuum, you know, and we're existing on different,
for a reason.
Yeah, I do believe that prepared me for where I am now, and I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world, you know. And although, like, I would offer myself the encouragement of the suffering that I know is coming, you know, and certainly it was a good deal of suffering, you know. But I would reaffirm that the source of the answers was in Scripture. That would be something that I would push myself toward, to lean on Scripture. I did that in a way, and I think that through doing that, through 20 plus years of leaning on Scripture and not understanding and not being able to put it together and not being able to submit, you know, see, I could go back and say, like, hey, just submit. But no, like, that would be me playing the role of God. I don't think I'm qualified. I wasn't ready yet to submit. I wasn't prepared. Like, I really do believe that friction was used to polish me. You know what I mean? And it polished me into a perfectly formed tool, you know, that to fulfill God's purpose, which it took until this point in my life to get where I'm at. It took a lot of suffering, a lot of poor choices, mistakes. I'm able to empathize with my former self, so I'm not angry at my former self for any of the choices I made that led me into those situations that were difficult, because I know that I was just working with what I understood at that time. And that understanding and everything that I've been through and all the suffering and all the mistakes I've made have put me in a position where I'm able to empathize with other people and the mistakes that they're making, and not become frustrated, and to just be a little bit more accepting and understanding, and to not judge people, because I realize that everyone is carrying stuff with them that you don't see. Everybody is fighting a battle that you don't necessarily know about. You know what I mean? And it took my life for me to learn that. It took the struggles and adversity, and it took prison and solitary confinement and starvation and, you know, things like that. It took those things to put me in the position I'm in now, where I truly feel that there's nobody that I'm not going to be able to empathize with, that I can't say, that I can't put myself in their shoes and say, hey, you know, I can't imagine how that feels, but I can imagine, you know, but I don't know. Things like that, like I've been through enough hurting and enough pain and enough as a result of that. And it sucks to say now, because obviously that younger version of me is someone that I love and care for, but no more than other people, you know? And I can't rightly say that someone that's going through suffering, that it could be for a better purpose, that it could be for some higher purpose, and then say, oh, well, my suffering, let me cancel that out. You know, no, I needed that. I needed that. And it's hard to say. I'm not saying that, believe me, there's things that I wish didn't happen. I'm like, oh, I wish that didn't happen. But in hindsight, in retrospect, seeing things clearly from a higher altitude, looking down and being like, wait, my perspective is better. I needed to do those things. I needed to make those mistakes. I needed to learn some things the hard way. I was somebody who early in life, I needed to put my hand on the stove again and again, even though people are going, no, it's hot. And I'm like, it doesn't look hot anymore. You know, I needed to do that.
How hot?
And right. It still burn me. It looks like it cooled off a little bit. I don't know. You know, I had to do that. I had to keep doing it, beating my head against the wall. And, you know, I maybe through some other means I could have reached that enlightenment sooner. But I think that the fact that I didn't, that it took struggling for all that time, made me what I am. It made me useful in the way that I am. And I wouldn't be that. So I wouldn't trade that for anything, you know? So ultimately I would offer myself encouragement, and I would reaffirm what I was already doing, which was to continue to lean on reading scripture and lean on scripture, you know, although I didn't have a holistic understanding of it. And there was a lot of it that I was like, well, what's this? You know, that struggling with those things and researching and trying to figure those ideas out and trying to get a handle on them made me where I am now, made me the tool for Christ that I am now, which I wouldn't be that if I hadn't done that. So again, I really wouldn't change it. I would offer myself the same encouragement, you know what I mean, that I would offer somebody else, but I wouldn't give them the secret that would change it. You know, I wouldn't tell them, oh, don't make this decision or don't do that. I've definitely played this game before in my head, the time machine game, where if I could go back and change one thing, well, you know, should I? I don't know. I think I would do it. I would let myself learn those things again, because clearly that was the best way for me to learn them. I don't want to assume that I know better than God. I don't. You know?
Yeah, man, that. I couldn't think of a better way to end it. That's so perfect, man. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today, man. I thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot going on, and everything's mental at the moment. So I really respect it, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I tell you what, I don't even think I have touched 2 of the bullet points of the 50 different things that I had that I could have possibly spoken about, which means that we're going to have you back on at some other point to discuss
I'd love to.
Because it's been sick. It's been absolutely sick. Thank you so much.
I know it will be a good conversation, and I'm grateful to have been a part of it. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
it was good to get to know you a little bit.